Okay, in this video we're going to be looking at the Chinese Free Trade Agreement and some of the benefits that the Chinese Free Trade Agreement will bring to the Australian economy and some of the costs. First of all, this is basically looking at some of the benefits that it will bring in terms of increased access for our exports, and these are the kind of things you can link to strong and sustainable growth, full employment and external stability. So it's important you just know a couple of key exports that the Chinese Free Trade Agreement will reduce tariffs on. So I suggest you go with beef, dairy, wine and seafood. 4 things that they're going to lower tariffs on that are going to be reduced from up to 30%, and in some cases they're going to be eliminated quickly, but all be eliminated within 2 to 9 years. It's also providing tariff cuts for minerals and energy, but again you don't want to be too specific because it's too much information to remember, so just focus on tariff cuts in those industries. In terms of services, you can also make links to they're providing us with greater access to banking, insurance, telecommunications services. As well as the fact that Australians will be able to open up their own hotels and restaurants in China. These sort of things you can link to the external stability because it's going to increase both exports of goods and services in our balance of merchandise trade. You can link it to strong and sustainable growth because the increased demand for these things from China is going to lead to increased increased employment in these industries. It's going to lead to increased export sales. It's going to lead to increased consumption because the exporters are generating more income as we become more competitive. Other things, this is more related to, so the last slide was related to the changes in our exports. First one's related to import spending. So there's also going to be tariff cuts on Chinese goods coming into Australia. Electronics, white goods, and some manufactured products will experience tariff cuts. So when you're talking about these, you're talking more in relation to how these things are going to lead to lower inflation because prices will be cheaper because there's no tariff on the import. You can also make links to Australia having to be more productive because of the increased competition. So lower tariffs on manufactured goods, electronics and white goods. Other things related to this free trade agreement, this is another big one for any question on inflation or productive capacity. So the idea is that they're increasing the foreign investment threshold, which basically means foreign investors are able to increase their amount of investment in Australia. Now that's good because it means that more foreign companies will come here, they will create jobs in Australia, but they will also bring new innovative ideas, new production methods, new technology, which will help to boost our productive capacity. So this increase in the foreign investment threshold is really important for questions related to productive capacity and allowing for non-inflationary growth. The biggest controversy, which we've discussed in class from this free trade agreement, is that for projects over $150 million, Chinese companies or even Australian companies are going to allow people to come over here and work on 457 visas from China, even if they don't test this local labour market first. So even if Australian workers want those jobs, they can be offered to Chinese workers on 457 visas first, without first testing the local labour market. So just to quote that, 150 million dollar projects with less than 15% of Chinese investment can access provisions to use Chinese labour. This is a huge threat to Australian jobs because they will be able to access workers from overseas on 457 visas without checking to see if there is local workers to do the job first. This is just a link to the tariff cuts. So you can see beef 12 to 25% to 0% over the next 9 years, wine 14 to 20 to 0, and dairy 10 to 19 to 0. Again, the exact tariff cuts are not important, but it's important to talk about the industries that are going to benefit. So in terms of a question related to trade liberalisation, how it would impact how it may be detrimental to one of the government's key economic goals, I'd suggest you talk about full employment. So first of all, define what trade liberalisation is, that it's designed to promote free trade and reduce barriers to trade. Define what full employment is. Then explain why theoretically trade liberalisation can lead to more unemployment, and that's because we import more because they're cheaper, and that can lead to structural unemployment in industries where we don't have comparative advantage, like manufacturing and motor vehicles and electronics and things like that. It's also important that you make links to the fact that in the recent free trade agreement, it's easier for big projects to source people on 457 visas rather than getting Australian workers, and that can also lead to more unemployment in Australia. Thanks for listening.